Hi, so this week we're talking about loose powder, which I'm really excited about. I love loose powder and it's really weird. It's one of those products that seems to get a really bad press. You often read that loose powder is ageing, that it makes your makeup look caked, makes you look more wrinkly. I just don't understand this at all. Nothing could be further from the truth in my opinion. It's all about the quality of the powder you use. But briefly, what loose powder is supposed to do is it's meant to mattify the face, to take away shine, although you don't have to take away shine completely if you want that dewy look, but mainly it mattifies. And also, I find it really unifies your base and your makeup, so it makes everything more evenly applied, makes everything more evenly toned generally. And it just kind of makes you more polished, it makes you more sort of dressed up and done up. It's a brilliant, brilliant product. I'm never without it. Now, the reason this column is about loose powder as opposed to pressed powder is that pressed powder is really, really easy to find. Pretty much all companies make it, and it's a really handy thing to have hanging around your bag. But decreasingly, companies are making loose powder because it's got to the point where it's quite hard to find a really good one. But I really wanted to do a column on it because I think loose powder is amazing. You really should have some in your toolkit, because I always start the day with a loose powder first thing in the morning when I put my makeup on, and then I'll use a pressed powder throughout the day just between meetings to touch up. So this one by Bobbi Brown is a really good one. It's the one I use. As you can see, it's been very well used, and I might touch up my face 3 times during the day if I've got a lot of meetings on, that sort of thing. But I always start in the morning with loose powder. I just find that loose powder gives you a finer finish, it gives you a sort of softer focus finish. It's just sort of more polished and fine. I really swear by it, and if you start with the base of that, it's a really good basis for your makeup throughout the day. But they're becoming increasingly hard to find. Now, I've wanted to do this column forever and ever, and the reason it's taken me so long is that I was completely devoted to my loose powder, which was Gentle Light by Clinique. This, in my opinion, is like the best loose powder ever made. I've used it for years and years and years. It's incredible, and now Clinique have decided to discontinue it. So for the past few months, I've been trying to find something to replace Clinique, because I'm in the position where my loose powder is about to run out, and when it's gone, and I needed to find something to use going forward. So that's why I'm doing this column, and that's why it's taken me so long. I've had lots of comments from people asking me what I'm using instead of Gentle Light, and it's literally taken me this long to find some that I'm happy with. And my chosen 6 are obviously in the column. So a few pointers on choosing a loose powder. Obviously it needs to be loose, although there are newfangled loose powders which I think are very clever actually for carrying around with you, where there's a solid tablet of powder in the compact, but then there's a sort of cutter at the top that grinds the powder into a loose formula. Those are really good. This one's by Smashbox. Yves Saint Laurent do one. I think Keramask has one that has the same cutting mechanism, and you just sort of twist it round and there are blades that turn it into a loose powder, and which are very smart. But generally, as a rule, you get a container like this. You get a large container of loose powder, and then you get a sprinkler, a shaker, like, you know, something you do with icing sugar or salt or pepper, and you just sprinkle it into the lid. So I'm going to show you that application technique, because that's certainly the most common type of loose powder that you can find. I personally feel very strongly that a loose powder, especially if you're over 30, should have light reflecting particles in it. And what that does, there'll be slightly shimmery, not glittery, but slightly shimmery particles in the loose powder that sort of reflect the light and make the whole of your face just look softer. It's a more flattering, a more youthful look, and it really makes a difference. Just kind of perks up dull skin. And I feel very strongly that all powders should have that, which is what the Clinique was so good at. This one I loved. This is in the column. It's by Chantecaille. It's absurdly expensive, and I'm annoyed about that too, but I'm going to demonstrate with this one because it's just a lovely finish. So when you put on loose powder, the best thing to do is to sprinkle a little in the lid of your container. I've sprinkled a little there. You really don't need very much. You can always add more later. So you can see that in the lid, and then invariably a loose powder will come with one of these velour puffs, and these are absolutely the best way to apply powder. because what you can do, you put your hand through the ribbon so you get purchase on the velour puff, press the puff into the powder so it's evenly coated and well pressed into the fabric. Then put your finger in the puff so you get this sort of almost rolling shape, and go over your face, and you're sort of rocking it almost like a blotter, like an ink blotter. Roll it over your face, and it shouldn't be leaving behind loads and loads of dust. I mean, you'll be able to see the powder, but you don't want loads leaving sort of dusty sprinkles everywhere. And then by all means get some more. Press into the powder and press all over your face. Now I think that you totally can go under your eyes. If your powder is fine enough, that shouldn't pose any problems at all, and it'll help with things like mascara smudging, eyeliner smudging and so on. Because the more moisture and oil you have under your eyes, the more your makeup will smudge. Nose is obviously a prime spot for shine, so go over nose. I always do on top of the eyelids to keep eyeshadow in place. I have very, very little makeup on at the moment, and that's right. You just put powder on after your foundation and concealer before you put on colour like blusher and eyeshadow. Although it's worth knowing that if you go over the top with blusher, you can tone it down by putting some loose powder over the top. Then take your powder brush. As you can see, this is so old and well loved. My dog, when she was a puppy, destroyed the handle by chewing it, but it's such a good quality brush that I love it. I'll never stop using it. It's by Stila. Take your brush, you can put a little powder on it if you want, but not really essential. And then sweep it over where you've been rolling the puff. And what that does is it takes away any excess and gives you a nice even result. And that's your powder base. And then after that you can layer on your colour, and throughout the day you'll find that your cheeks probably stay matte and stay looking quite polished, but maybe you'll become oily on the nose or the chin or whatever, at which point you can just get out your pressed powder and, using the same technique, rolling it over the shine. And just a little pointer about colours. You can get some pressed powders in a translucent finish, which almost looks white in the pot, and the idea is that it just mattifies any skin tone. It doesn't really matter what your skin tone is. I have to say I'm not a fan of translucent powders. I think it's much better to try and match your skin tone. Translucent powder looks really horrible on black skin. I think it just makes it look really ashy and grey. You're much better getting one that matches your skin tone. So I, for example, would use this very pale one, and as with every base makeup, concealer, foundation, primer and so on, I'm a really big believer in a yellow tone. Whether you are black, white or somewhere in between, a yellow tone is always the most flattering in a powder, always. So I use this very pale one with a yellow tone, whereas the translucent ones look a little bit like talcum powder, and to me they look dull. I mean, each to their own, but I prefer the coloured ones. Also, what you can do is, if you have an old loose powder lying around that you just feel isn't doing that much for you, you can buy a glittery powder that's too glittery to use on its own, and just throw in a dollop of the glittery powder in with your old powder and just mix it up with a teaspoon or a knife or something, blend it together, and that will give you a light reflecting powder. And then you're ready to get on with the rest of your makeup. So give loose powder a try. I just think it's one of the unsung heroes of makeup. It's become very fashionable to say don't use it, but I personally will never stop. So hopefully with that technique you will learn to love it. Thanks very much for watching. See you next time.